I've got 3 comics from my lovely community on Discord, and I'm going to critique them in this video. If you want to be featured in future videos and join my Discord, the link is in the video description. And if you want access to coaching or monthly Q&As about all things comics, then check out my Patreon. The link is also in the video description. Right, let's go on to the first one. So up first, we have The Cycle of George. If you've watched any of these comic critique videos in the past, you'll know that I have featured George on this channel before. It's always a pleasure to read your comics, George. And for this comic, I want to focus on this spread here. So this is the start of chapter 2. And the reason I want to focus on this spread is because I think that there is an issue that is affecting your storytelling. And the examples are really strong here. And the main issue is composition. And composition of both the art and the word balloons. Now, before I start with this, George, I want you to remember this for the next comic. In fact, the rest of this comic, I want you to remember this. Breathing room. Just keep saying to yourself and ask yourself, is there enough breathing room on this page or in this panel before you start penciling and inking? Because that's the biggest problem here, is that there's not enough breathing room. And the panels and the story is very claustrophobic. Now, sometimes, in fact, oftentimes, when you're drawing and making the comic, you can't see that because you're too close to it. So always sanity check this with the Discord. Show the Discord your thumbnails or your plans for your page layouts before you commit to them, if you need that second opinion. And don't create in a vacuum. So, and hopefully this critique will show you what I mean. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through both of these pages and point out where I feel the lack of breathing room is impacting the storytelling, and then I'll show you changes. I'm not suggesting that you make these changes on these particular pages. Again, it's just about taking in the principles and applying them to future pages. So here we go, page 1, chapter 2, page 1. The first issue that I see, which isn't a huge issue, but it's an issue nonetheless, is that I feel that this panel definitely needs more room. Now, the reason that I think it needs more room is partly because although it's clear what's in here, like you can clearly see that this is a castle on top of a mountain, and you can clearly see that that's the moon. And obviously the caption here is helping us as well. But I still feel that it feels a lot smaller than perhaps it should feel, because it's a big castle on a mountain and it's called the Iron Castle. I think it needs a bit more grandeur, a bit more space to be epic, right? So that's the first thing that I noticed, was that I think we need more room here. We need more breathing room. But where it really messes you up is this section here of the page. I will show you exactly how I deal with this very shortly, but this is probably one of the best, if not the best, example of the issue that you're having with your panel compositions, is that everything is very tightly packed. You've got this character here, who I'm going to call Beardy, and you've got this character here, who I'm going to call Graph Girl, and they are basically on top of each other. Like, there's no negative space between them, and if you think about their silhouettes, they are blending together. So again, it's not particularly clear. And likewise, Kriska. I don't know how to pronounce her name, by the way, so it's either Kriska or Krissa. I'm going to say Kriska, but I apologise if I'm mispronouncing her name. Speaking of Kriska, because I've got no notes on this panel. I think panel 3 is absolutely fine. It's great. I really love her design. I love her expression. I love her hand gesture. All of that, fantastic. I really like that. I hate this. So there's Clip Studio Paint. There we go. I hate this. I hate that Kriska's head is overlapping into panel 2. I think that is if you just got rid of that, it would improve the page massively. So if you did nothing else but fix that, it would improve the page a huge amount. Now, I understand why people do the overlaps where the contents of the panel sort of goes over the panel borders. I like doing it as well, and in fact you already do it up here with the spires of the castle. And if anything, I would push that more, like really have those like go almost like they're piercing the sky. It's a really cool effect. So I lean into that more, but I absolutely wouldn't do that. And the reason why I wouldn't do that is because it's interfering massively with what's going on in this panel here. So if you think about how the audience are gonna experience this page, right? We start here because it's a cool castle on a mountain, right? Everyone's gonna look at that first, and then we're gonna go up to this caption and read this, and then we're going to go over here and we will probably read that, and then we're going to come down to here and read this, and then we're going to come into here and see, oh wait, no, sorry, we need to then go up here, read this, and then we'll go into here and read that. But do you see what I mean? We are going from panel 2 straight to panel 4, and we're skipping panel 3. So we have to stop, backtrack, and then carry on with the story. You never want your audience to do that, because it breaks the immersion, it breaks the pacing, and it really hurts the readability of the page. So that's page 1. Page 2, which is here, doesn't have this nearly as much. In fact, there's only really one panel on this page that I think really suffers from a lack of breathing room. Everything else is largely okay. So this panel here, I really like this panel because it's clear that you've given a lot more thought and consideration to this, or your idea was just much stronger conceptually, and it's come through in the final product because you've mapped out the visual here, and let me use a different color, the word balloons here. So it's a really well planned out panel where you've got word balloons and you've got the art. They're not fighting for attention, they're not obscuring each other. It's very, very clear. The only note I will have on the word balloons themselves is that you've got like one word balloon here, one word balloon here. It's not clear that there's two people talking or one person talking. Now I know that there are two people off panel. We've got Beardy and we've got Graph Girl, but I don't know which one's talking in which order. So to get rid of that ambiguity, just have one person talk, just have one tail goes up here and one connecting tail between them. That doesn't matter that it's two people talking. If it does, then I would change the composition to make it clearer of who's talking in which order. That's it for that word balloon. Affirmative, I don't know who's saying affirmative. I'm guessing it's Beardy, but I have no idea who's saying that word, and so again I would get rid. This panel here, this is the culprit, and the reason it's the culprit, and you might not even notice, viewers, what exactly I've got a problem with when it comes to this, because that's a great expression, it's a great pose, like Beardy's pushing his glasses up his nose. What's wrong with that? It's what's going on in the background. We've got Kriska walking towards the window in the background. She's getting up from her desk here, presumably excuse me, presumably she's going this way, round him and towards the window, right? But most people are not going to notice this, because bear in mind also that a lot of people read comics, even traditional laid out comics like this, on their phone. So it's going to be even smaller. Sorry, it's going to be even smaller to them, and they're just not going to notice it, or they're going to like squint and be like, what is that in the background? And again, it kind of breaks that ability to enjoy the comic, because you're having to stop focusing on the story to figure out what's going on in the background, because it's not quite clear enough. If that's intentional, great. I don't think that's intentional here. So that's the main issue that I've got with page 2. Now, let's look at what my suggestions are, and I will explain and justify what the changes that I'm suggesting. So, page 1. As I mentioned, the establishing shot, I think, again, we just need more room. So some of the changes that I made is that I gave a little bit more room to the moon, although I'd probably push it further to the left. But again, like the moon is kind of encroaching on the castle here. So just give it a little bit more space. In fact, if I were to do it again, I'd probably put the moon there, just so you can sort of separate those elements out a little bit more and make them a lot clearer and make their silhouettes a lot stronger. Again, I really like what you did with the spires, so absolutely kept that. I moved the caption from the top right to the top left, because again, I wanted them to read the Iron Castle and then see the Iron Castle. I just felt that was a more effective order. And also it gave me room on the right hand side to add in this dialogue, this word balloon. So this word balloon here is actually this first sentence from Beardy. That's going to go here. And the word balloon tail is going to point to like one of these rooms, whichever room they are actually in. So, which again helps with the transition where we're going from outside of the castle to inside of the castle. And I need to do that more than you did, because as you'll see in the next 2 panels, I'm not showing much of the interior at this point on this page, because I'm going from here to here. So this word balloon is the second part of Beardy's dialogue. And again, we can have this caption, you can put this caption down here if you want, or we can put it on the next page. It doesn't necessarily have to be here. Now, the difference between this introduction of these two characters and this introduction of these two characters are, one, there's space in between them. So again, when you're thinking about their silhouettes read a lot more clearly because they've got room to breathe. They've got breathing room. We also see a lot more of the graph in the background as well. So we can establish that Graph Girl is stood in front of a graph rather than stood in front of what looks like an easel. I mean, it is an easel, but there's no indication that it's a graph yet. And the third panel here, again, I've got zero problems with this at all. I think it's a great panel, great expression, great. And I just added in this word balloon and this word balloon to here and here. So again, there's a lot more breathing room on this version compared to this version. And we've got one fewer panel, but that's okay as well. Because for this panel here, all I did was take this and put it as the first panel of the second page. So this is this, okay? And again, we've got this caption here, which is going to be here. Does that make sense? And then the dialogue, I've got this dialogue here, which is this dialogue here. Just to show you my thinking. Now, panel 2. I think this is the most important panel on both pages. And I'll show you the difference between my version and your version. Despite the fact that they are effectively the same panel, they are functioning in two different ways. So the purpose of this panel is, I think, a lot more clear than the original one, because the purpose of this panel is to show the relative positions of our characters. So think about what we've done, right? We've introduced this character and this character, right? Obviously that character is that character. And then we've introduced this character. So we've introduced 3 characters across 3 panels. So then the fourth panel is to show where those characters are in relation to each other, to give the audience that sense of space, that sense of where people are within the space. So this one, we can clearly see that Beardy is in front of the desk, Kriska is sitting at the desk, and Graph Girl is just off the desk. And we've also got a big word balloon in there as well. This one has those elements as well, except that it kind of blurs together a little bit more. Like, we've got the 2 characters there that kind of, again, don't have that clear silhouette, and everything is very claustrophobic. So it'll be very easy for the audience to miss it. I'm not saying that everybody will miss it, but a lot of people will. Whereas this, it's a lot harder to miss what's going on here, because you've got separate elements. Okay. Then for this one, to be honest, pretty much for the rest of the page, it was kind of just following on from your own story. So this was very, very easy for me to do because you've done all the hard work for me. So I took this panel and just recropped it there, like nice and easy. And then for this one, this panel here, I just moved her to the left because I don't need her in the panel, because I'm not going to use that idea because I don't think there's enough room for it. So I just cut it. And it gives me more room for the dialogue. And then I just took this panel here and put it down here because I want to show her getting up as we're transitioning to the next part of the scene, as we introduce another character into the room. No spoilers, you'll have to read to find out who that is. And then this one here was just a pragmatic panel. I didn't really have a storytelling reason necessarily to do it, but it's kind of, it was taking this idea and basically turning the camera around, because I didn't need to show her by the window at this point, because I think you could do that later. And also, from what I read, it's not important that she's at the window yet. Hopefully that makes sense. It should make sense to you, George, because you should know what I'm talking about. So I just have Beardy and I have Graph Girl, and they're just carrying on with their dialogue, right? Because then the next panel, the next page, sorry, the first panel on that is Kriska here just looking straight on and saying, okay. So that panel there, for example, that could be this panel here. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can move stuff around relatively easily. But ultimately, I think what I would really recommend, in fact, let me put these side by side so you can really see a comparison. Ultimately, when it comes to paneling and layouts and all that sort of stuff, the thing that you really need to remind yourself and just constantly think about is breathing room. If that means getting rid of an idea, that's worth it, definitely. And if that means simplifying where the camera is, that's also worth it. Like 100%, do that every time. You are a very, very ambitious comic creator, and your enthusiasm really shows on the page. I think hopefully people will agree with me in the comments that you can see what I can see. I really enjoy Lintosphere. I enjoyed it the first time around reading it. I enjoyed it this time around reading it as well. I think you've come along really, really nicely. I hope you continue it and just keep going and keep improving a little bit at a time. But also use this as an opportunity to give yourself permission to simplify a little bit and just allow yourself to sort of slow down and just make something simple. Make a page that is just simple. You don't have to put the camera up here or the camera over there or the camera down there. Just simple. Because once you can do that consistently and do that where you're not even really thinking about it, it's almost a habit that you're able to lay out a panel and lay out a page, where the word balloons don't fight with the art and there is enough room to tell the story visually. That's when you can then start to introduce the more challenging perspectives and stuff like that. That's what I would recommend. That's what I would do if I was in your position. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do any of this. Obviously, it's your comic. But that is what I suggest for Lintosphere. If nothing else, just think breathing room. And everyone else, the link to Lintosphere is in the description of this video. So make sure you add it to your reading list and support George, because the comic is a hell of a lot of fun to read. Let's go to the second comic. Now, I'm actually going to do this slightly out of order because initially Goldberger was going to be my next one, my next victim. But I want to skip to the third one simply because a lot of the issues with the third one are similar to a lot of the issues that George was having. So the third one is the comic called Scars, and it's by Moritaka Ishida. So I'm not showing it yet because I want to put a trigger warning up front. This comic shows the aftermath of violence and the aftermath of domestic violence. So there's no violence in the comic or in the scene that I'm going to be showing, but there is depictions of the aftermath of violence. So this is a trigger warning. I will put the timestamp on for the next comic that I'm going to be doing, which is Goldberger's, on the screen now. So click that timestamp if you want to skip over this. Is everyone good? Cool. So this is Scars. So this is the first page that they sent me. And they sent me a page with and without the speech and the sound effects. So that made this a lot easier. So thank you very much for that. I need to be asking people that from now on, because it made things so much easier. Especially considering that one of the main things that we're going to be talking about is word balloon placement, as well as the visual storytelling. And yeah, I'll come on to that. In fact, I'll come on to that now. So I don't know what happened before this page. Obviously, this is panel 1. I don't know what happened before then, but I can only assume that this is the aftermath of a severe beating. And so the first panel we have, I assume, the perpetrator opening the door and then slamming the door, leaving him on the floor in the darkness. That's the setup that I am kind of assuming, but can infer based on what you've drawn. The problem that I've got isn't that. Like, that's fine, that's great, it's really effective. The problem I've got is that we go from this panel here to this panel here instantly. So if you imagine it playing out as if it was an animation or a film or like a live action thing, it's like the door is open and then slammed and then immediately opened again as Abby enters the room. So there's no sense of time passing because we go from this panel to this panel, which is quite a quick amount of time because we've got the door opening and then slamming. We know that instinctively that's not going to take very long. And then we've got the same amount of space, like physical space, between that panel and then the door opening again with Abby entering the room. So that's the first thing that I kept sort of going back and forth and thinking, like, how would you do that? Because I mean, there are ways that you could do that. You could have the door open and then slam and then a black panel there and then maybe move this panel down to here, but then that means you have to move these two panels onto a new page and it complicates things, right? So I was trying to think of ways like, can I, almost like as a challenge to myself is, can I change the storytelling or can I adapt the storytelling without having to redraw anything? Spoiler alert, I could. But again, like with George, you did all the hard work for me. So let me show you my version of this page, and I'll explain why I did things the way I did them. So here we go. Instead of, there's one thing that I got rid of, which was the perpetrator opening the door and then slamming the door. Again, if I've got that wrong, where she's opening the door and then slamming the door here, if I got that wrong, fair enough, let me know. But instead of the door opening and then slamming, we've got our character starting this page just sat in the darkness, in the quiet, in the aftermath of this beating. It's quite effective. Again, it's a highly emotional situation, highly emotive expression. You can see the pain on his face as well as the scars on his face. And then the door opens again, but now it's his daughter. So it's I think that's a really nice opening to that page. Well, nice, relatively nice. You know, obviously it's not nice. Now, I tried to copy your style in terms of your dialogue choices, like the ellipses and with the spaces in between. And I know that the question mark goes below a lot of times. I tried to remember to do that, but you're quite inconsistent with that. Sometimes the question mark goes at the end, sometimes it goes underneath. I would recommend that you stick with one, and ideally stick with one where the question mark or the punctuation goes at the end of the word, simply because it's going to be easier for your audience to read it. So all I did, again, flip these. Got the introduction of Abby. She's here, her dialogue is here across 2 panels. I think also that's quite effective because it shows that she's progressively getting more upset as she's sort of taking in the state of her dad. And then we've got this panel at the bottom instead of it being here. And I think this is really effective. I think this works really well because if we forget about the speech for a second, we just look at the visuals. We've got Dad who is sat there in the darkness in the aftermath of this beating. The door opens, like, oh God, maybe she's come back for round 2. No, it's Abby instead. Abby gets more and more upset. And then we've got this panel here where perhaps he's looking away. And, you know, as in, you know, don't look at my face kind of thing. And we're taking advantage of the space that you've already provided me for the dialogue. Because when we look at the original, this panel in particular really perplexed me because you've got this space here, all of this space here, and you put a little sound effect there and nothing else. And you put the speech bubble on top of the character, which is completely unnecessary. Again, I would much rather, like you did, a speech bubble like that and just put that there, you know? Even if you decided not to change anything or make any of the suggestions that I made, move that speech bubble over here, because that would help a lot. Because again, it's I don't understand that composition. So, but otherwise, all good. And I haven't had to redraw anything, which is quite nice. So let's now move on to page 2. Because page 2, again, I didn't really need to redraw anything with this page. This is page 2. However, this sequence, this dialogue sequence, is a little bit muddled. So, in fact, let me get rid of mine so you're not distracted. Bosh. So we start here, okay, and then we go to this one. It's great. And now, so this is how I read it. I then went to this one, and then I went to this one. That's how I read it. And even now, I'm still not entirely sure how I'm supposed to read it. I assume that I read this one first, this one second, and then I go over to here for this one third, and this one fourth, and then I go over to here for this one fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. That's what I assume it's supposed to be. The problem is that this is too close to this, and there's too much space here. So the spaces between this speech bubble and this speech bubble is a lot greater than this speech bubble and this speech bubble, which is why it's a lot easier for you to go from this word balloon to this one, instead of from this one to this one, right? So I had a little play around and I thought, okay, well, we've got number 1 here, number 2 here, then we go up to the face and down again, and then we go to the third panel. Now, again, I might have got the order wrong. She might be saying 2 things and then he says 2 things and she says 1 thing. I don't know. So you'll have to correct me in the comments if I've got this wrong. But this way, we've got this here, and then there's nothing to get confused with down there. So we're not even going down there. We're going across here. So we're starting here and we're going across here. You see what I mean? Rather than like that. which kind of looks like the golden ratio a little bit, but you know, hopefully you can see what I mean. So that speech bubble placement definitely needs to be fixed, because again, I'm still not 100% sure what order to read the speech bubbles in. But that's page 2. And page 3 and page 4, let me just get these out here. I didn't do anything with, because I think they're fine. Absolutely fine. I mean, the story is fucking bleak. It's really bleak. And I'm curious to see what happens next. But yeah, again, I didn't really see anything wrong, certainly not from a Webley point of view with this, other than maybe nitpicking certain things. Like there's a bit of a tangent here that's quite close to her as well. I would push this into this space here, this into this space here. But broadly speaking, like that, great, that, great. That's fine as well. Well, that's okay. Maybe I'd move her up a little bit. But yeah. Like these are tiny little tweaks, you know. There's nothing wholesale that I'll be like, oh, this isn't working. So yeah, I think it's all good. I don't really have anything to say about pages 3 and 4, but page 1, I would consider playing around with the order of things a little bit, just to see how the emotions change and how the pacing changes as well. And then for page 2, definitely address that, because that's out of everything, that's the biggest problem, I think, is the order in which people are reading those web balloons. I've got Moritaka's Blue Sky link in the description. They're not hosting this anywhere. Hopefully they'll get published at some point. But yeah, check out their updates and the work in progress shots of their manga called Scars, plural, sorry. All right, let's go on to the final comic. In fact, let me move me over here. Okay, the first thing that I want to talk about with this comic here is style. Now, again, you might recognize this style. You won't recognize this comic, but you will recognize this style, because I've had Goldberger on the channel before with their other comic called 457. And one of the things that they were concerned about is that their style doesn't look professional. Now, I personally disagree. I wouldn't change your style at all. I think your style is the strongest thing you've got for your comic by far. I could tell that this is done by you. And I think anyone who's read a 457 and then comes to this will also tell immediately it's done by you. That is rare. Like, that is not easy to achieve. And a lot of artists, they really struggle with not having that visual identity or that visual style where people can look at it and be like, oh, that's Goldberger. Like, that's easy. Like, I know exactly who's done that. I don't even need to read anything. I can just look at a single panel and I can see that that's Goldberger. I get that with your work. That is rare. Hold on to it. Do not think and do not get in your own head where you start to think, oh, it's not professional enough and I need to change things. Don't do that. The only time that you should change your style is if you just don't like it anymore and you actually want to do something else. But if you're doing it because you're worried about what other people might think, no. No. You keep this. That being said, when it comes to the style, the thing that I would perhaps change is the only real panel that I bumped up against was this one here. Can you actually see this? Yes, you can. This one here. Because I think like that's fine. And like that's fine. And that's fine. Where the arms are kind of like Mr. Tickle and very sort of spaghetti and very cartoony in that sense. All of that is all good. The only reason that I would suggest not doing that is because I think that that is a little bit too distracting. Like that exaggeration is a little bit too distracting, and there doesn't seem to be a reason for it. So that's the only that was the only one out of the entire comic that I was like, oh, okay. Because if we look at 457, in fact, let me get 457. So this comic is a lot more abstract in general. Like the idea is a lot more abstract. So the arms being like Mr. Tickle and very sort of spaghetti-ish just fits a lot more with the sort of the vibe and the tone. And you'll see, particularly as we get into the bar, you'll see that the arms spaghettify a lot more. Or maybe not as much as I remember. I think it's because I'm thinking about my favourite. I mean, that was quite spaghetti. I just want to get to my favourite panel in this thing. Well, yeah, that's... But do you see what I mean? Like, that fits. That really fits. Because, again, he's panicking. He's panicking. Like, it really fits. I really like it. But that... that's the panel I wanted to get to. It's really cool. But again, like, you know, you got the spaghettification of the arms, and they're really like Mr. Tickle. Again, I think that works with this comic. I think it works with the vibe. I don't think it works as much here. I don't have anything to say about the comic in terms of the critique. I don't think there's anything that I would change. I only intended to read like the first 5 pages. I ended up reading the entire thing. So I think what you've got is great. I think you are certainly a lot better than you think you are. That's for damn sure. And hopefully just me saying to you that you've got very little to feel doubtful about is going to help, especially when it comes to your style. The biggest problem that you've got has nothing to do with the comics that you've made so far. The biggest problem you've got is that you don't know how this one ends. And I think that is probably causing a bit of trepidation when it comes to making progress. Like, starting a comic and sort of setting the stage is the easiest thing in the world to do. But it can be really hard once you get to like that first sort of wall, and if you don't know where you're going, that can sort of completely freeze all progress that you've made, which might be happening with you now. So here's what I would suggest. Figure out what your destination is, and obviously that's easy for me to say, but how do you do that? So what I actually did was I looked at the form. I'm not going to show the form, but I ask everybody to fill out a Google form so I kind of see what's going on and get an idea of where you are in your mind. One of the questions on the form is what changes in the main character by the end of the story, and you said you didn't know. So I'm going to ask you about Oriana now. Like, Oriana is the main character. Like this character here. This is Oriana. What are her flaws? Like, what challenges does she face? What are her current goals? What are her wants and needs? If you can answer at least one of those questions, and then think about how that transformation can manifest. So let's say that her flaw is that she finds it difficult to connect with anyone else after what happened with Ash, right? I don't want to spoil it because I want people to read it. And through the events of the comic or through the events of the story, she starts to learn to trust again and open up and maybe move on from what happened with Ash. It kind of spoils it a little bit, but you know, maybe that's how the story ends, right? We need to get to that point where she makes that transformation, going from untrusting to trusting, for example. Or maybe the challenge is that she has to defeat the evil empire, or that she has to find a specific plant, because obviously she's the Botaneer, that she has to find a specific plant in order to save a planet that means a lot to her personally. Maybe it's a planet that she grew up on, or the planet where her family are, stuff like that. Now, don't overthink this too much. I would prioritize it, definitely, because knowing where you're going with it will help sort of alleviate a lot of the anxiety you'll be feeling. I mean, it literally is like the difference between just going out of your house and just walking in a direction hoping you'll get somewhere, to going out of your house knowing where you're going and knowing how to get there. So I would prioritize it, but don't overthink it, because one of the things that we do, and one of the reasons why we overthink things like this, is because there's the element of it being a permanent decision, which is really anxiety inducing, right? Like, you could decide on an ending, and maybe it's a bad ending, maybe it's an ending that ruins the story, maybe it's an ending that makes the whole comic fall apart, maybe it's an ending that people judge you for. So to sort of circle around that, because it's easy for me to say, oh, just don't worry about it, don't think about that sort of stuff, but you're going to think about it. So to address it head on, I would say think about the ending, but know that it doesn't have to be the ending to the story. Just make sure that it's the ending of the first arc. So you have the optionality, if you want to, that when you do get to the end of that arc, let's say that by the end of the arc, Oriana decides to learn to love again or trust again or whatever, right? So that's her transformation, that's her arc. you can decide to leave it there if you want to and move on to a different project, or you can decide, okay, well, let's then pick this up and let's go to the next arc. What else happens to her? Maybe we then move on to her challenge that she has to find that specific plant or whatever. But you have those stepping stones to the end, but you can stop at any point once you get to each of those stepping stones. Does that make sense? So think about an ending to the arc rather than the ending to the entire story, because that's too big and that's too much of pressure, and unnecessary pressure as well. So focus on what the ending is for the first arc and then keep going, and don't change your style, because I really like your style, and I would guesstimate that people in the comments will as well. And you can find out and look more about their style in their comic if you click the link in the description below. And make sure to look at the playlist for these comic creators and these comic critiques, because you'll be able to see Goldberger's other comic, 4:57 AM, which is also a very, very good comic. So thank you very much, all three of you, for giving me the comics and to look at. I appreciate the trust, and all three of you are doing a fantastic job. I hope you keep going, and I hope you get your comics finished, because that's the thing that we all want, to read more comics made by independents. Yes! Anyway, watch the playlist that's on screen. Thanks. See you later.